let's jump in. We've got a tight time frame here, and a lot of interesting folks to hear from. I'm going to skip intros. Everybody's bio is in the app, and I think it'll be apparent. Everybody's credentials will be apparent if you flip through those bios, except for mine. And so a quick word on that. I was asked to moderate because of my experience developing artificial intelligence software at my firm, at Green Target. So you've all heard of IBM Watson. At Green Target, we have Jason. And Jason is a proprietary artificial intelligence solution that we use in our business every day. It's not on the scale of Watson. Jason's just a little guy. He's super cute. And he's incredibly powerful and really adept at doing things that humans aren't very good at, like teasing nuanced patterns out of large data sets or firing underperformers. So clearly, we're all experts here, especially me. But for this group, because there's a lot of folks here who are wondering what we're really talking about, and I'd like to take a step back and, Dan Wagner, ask you to just sort of define what we are talking about when we talk about artificial intelligence in a marketing context.
Okay. Sorry, I'll decompose into two questions. One is, what is marketing? Two is, what is artificial intelligence in the context of it? So marketing hasn't changed. The sequence of marketing is you begin with some kind of baseline understanding of human brand and human behavior through kind of proper data collection. You use that to infer on the same data set what are preferences for brand and opinion. You apply some segmentation that typically goes into some terrible PowerPoint, and then it goes to your organization to make some decisions about how you use those segments to infer both what creative is going to be most effective, and then those segments are going to be most receptive to that creative through some of your kind of arbitrary digital panels. But again, that's typically presented via PowerPoint, and that's typically kind of goes along with some subjective interpretation of how you should use that within the context of the client. So what's the next step? So the next step is that the context of information has changed. You now have a much richer data set on which you can apply different types of statistical learning. You have first-party customer data. You have digital exhaust data. In some cases, you have the outcomes of creative testing. So the deepest context that you have is that the volume of data is changing, and the recurrency of data that you have is changing. The questions, though, remain the same. Who do I care about? What do I say? And whether or not things worked. Now what you have is a different set of data in terms of volume and recurrency. And what you have is a very different set of methods that you can apply to help answer those key questions about marketing. So what are those different methods that you have? So the primary set of methods and how those have changed is when you get the data from point A to point B, you essentially have a more advanced set of statistical learning methods. When you say AI, that is a fancy name for good statistics. Just remember that is a fancy name for good statistics. And what that does is you can take recurrency of that data, train it using some of these methods. Google has developed an algorithm called TensorFlow. A number of organizations have developed different classes of machine learning, deep learning being the most common. You use that to train your data set over and over again, and you reapply that to your same data set to help inform segmentation and application of that data in the context of marketing. The outcomes of that are typically the same as what you do in marketing, which is you have a higher level of precision, you have a higher level of redeployment of that to help inform segmentation over time, and most importantly, you're able to achieve the core problem that exists in marketing is you don't have proper attribution against your prediction. So up front, because you have this recurrency of data, you can provide a quicker set of prediction in terms of how you measure what segments you should build. At the end, because of artificial intelligence, you have this recurring data to help you evaluate whether or not your campaigns were effective and ineffective. So the principles of marketing haven't changed. What has changed is the recurrency of data that you have, the methods that you use to help analyze that data, and then most importantly is the potential for attribution to help you derive cause and effect. So essentially the ability to help you understand whether or not your campaigns actually worked because of the connection between the data that you have, the campaigns that you've done it, and whether or not you can causally infer whether or not those campaigns have been ineffective or effective based on the difference in methods that you have.
Okay, thanks. This is an important question, so I want to get some other, see if anybody else has anything to add to that. Nick, how would you react to all that?
Yeah, sure. it's all marketers in the room. So, and actually we're all marketers, whether you're in technology or in marketing, you're running a business, you're trying to attract an audience. So just to simplify things, I think there's a lot of hype around AI, and people get, I think, mired into the minutia of what it is. And so if you take a step back and look at two very broad camps in terms of why we're even talking about this, there's the media, which creates a ton of hype and says AI is going to kill us, it's going to destroy the human race, it's going to take all of our jobs. And most of the focus has been around that from a media perspective. And then there's sort of the other side of it, which is augmentation, right? And so if you really take a step back and just think about sort of since the dawn of time, humans have always looked to tools to help augment what they're doing. And we're very focused on sort of the augmentation component of this, which is what's the problem we're solving for? We don't actually go to market and talk to our customers about AI. I think there's a curve that has sort of, we've moved past, which is check the box, do we have an AI strategy? I think the focus that I see in the market today is, you know, what is the problem we're solving for? What are the tools we need to leverage to help us accomplish those problems? If you listen to sort of Dan's explanation, really what he's describing is something that people do, but machines do that at a scale that's not humanly possible. So that the description of marketing and the approach to marketing, all of the people in this room, and I've worked on the marketing side of the business in advertising technology and in big marketing agencies, and that is what people are doing every day. There's nothing new about that. What's new is this idea that data fuels a scale to automate some of the things you're doing at a level that just wasn't possible before. And so I think just focusing on the problem you're solving for and not so much focused on how AI works is sort of what I'm seeing in the market today.
So you mentioned in there a couple of the risks, taking all our jobs, killing us, something we're all certainly have our eye on. Lauren, what are the real risks today? Like you guys are obviously at Google are seeing this and wrestling with a lot of the things that can go wrong in an AI campaign. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, definitely a hot topic today. I think the way I think about it is there's a line between content, services, advertising that is useful and assistive. And the other side of that is when it becomes creepy. I heard that word used today, and intrusive, right? So the risk is you cross that line and then you lose the user's trust. So we talk about data and all the data that feeds into the AI that actually allows us to make useful creative, useful advertising, useful services. Once we lose that trust, it becomes not as useful. And so the way that we think about it, and I think, you know, the trust is them giving us them giving you their data, and what you do with it is very, very powerful. You make useful things for them. So we think about how are we transparent about what we're collecting? How are we transparent about what we do with the data that we collect? How are we secure about storing that data and using that data? Because if the data is not secure, right, it is in jeopardy. And then making sure that the user has controls over which data to provide us. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
For sure. What about the rest of you guys? You guys are all working with tools like this. How are you advising clients on these security and issues and risk?
You know, it's interesting because at the dawn of the internet, you know, people were concerned what's out there, and there's data everywhere. Marketers know this, right? You guys, the data you have access to, if consumers actually understood it, it would scare them. On the same note, it's about providing a value to the consumer or to that end user that they're willing to put up with what you're doing to add value. And where it becomes creepy is, well, I really am not willing to do that. I don't know, how many of you have received terms of service updates in the last 2 weeks? Probably hundreds of them in every system. Well, that's all because of new legislation, GDPR, things coming down the pike, which are going to do a better job at ensuring that we're all doing our jobs, controlling the access and use of the data, and allowing people to opt out and allowing people to see the data and really understand it. And my answer is you better have a good reason to be using the data because people are going to ask you what you have. And at the same time, you can have an explanation of what you're doing with it, and hopefully that will not cause them to click opt out.
So what do the folks in this room need to be, let's throw this out to all of you, what do they need to be doing today? How should they be doing their jobs differently with the tools that are out there? Dan Wagner, why don't you take it?
Sure. I'll begin with a statement, is artificial intelligence is probably pointless for 95% of you. Completely pointless. You should be focused on very, very basic statistical principles. Again, there are kind of two sides to marketing. You have prediction and you have attribution. In the case of prediction, you can do a lot of better things, but I would encourage you to focus on very simple methods. And simple methods are, I have creative A and I have creative B. Which of those outcomes is going to be better served, or which of those creatives is going to better move people in terms of brand opinion and conversion opinion? In some cases, you can help understand whether or not somebody's actually going to prove they're likely to purchase a product. You can actually do that much better now. And you can do that better with very basic statistics. In your world, in PR, where you have a lot of multi-channel work, and because of the reduction in accessibility of data, attribution has become very, very difficult, and it's become more and more difficult over time. And so as a result, the focus that you have, given most of the assets that you have in terms of data scientists, in terms of understanding of data science, you should be focused on very, very basic thing, which is what types of creative are going to be effective, which types are going to be ineffective, which audiences are going to be effective, which audiences aren't going to be effective, and really focus on those first principles concepts and getting them down really, really, really well. The attribution problem that you have is going to be very, very difficult because the walls are closing off in terms of your sources. The thing that you can do increasingly in the future is the amount of first-party customer data about who is buying your product, who isn't buying your product, that is going up. And so the potential for trying to understand which of your campaigns in terms of multi-campaign environment is working and not working should be your 2-year ambition. Should you be setting your plans around that roadmap of how do I get to that point? So now get control of the basics in terms of basic prediction, and then build a roadmap such that in 2 years you have the staffing, the understanding, and the organization to make sure that you can get control of attribution. But right now, focus on the basics, build a plan for attribution, and begin building a sequence of projects to help you get there.
Anybody want to take issue with that 95% number?
I'd love to jump on that. So one of the things we're talking about is data, right? And the how much data we have access to and how many different places and things it comes from. But the focus on, and even the definition of big data. So we talk about it, and everyone's talking about the analytics data that Dan just talked about. But there's other data sets that you have. And and I'll just say, we have a product called Lucy, and Lucy is, again, an AI virtual assistant for marketers, communicators, brands. The data, think of it as Alexa for your data. You can just ask questions and get answers from your own data. That data can be what most people consider data, which is columnar or data that's in a database. It also can include every PowerPoint you've created. So someplace where you've already taken data and made it into information, and you can query it and say, what's the top selling candy bar in Poland? And up comes the slide that tells you the top 10 candy bars selling in Poland, assuming that's in your repository. Every PDF, every PowerPoint, all of your internal data, all your internal databases. Also, all the data you license. So data like eMarketer, Forrester, Kantar, these third-party data sources that you can also access all through one query engine, one interface, and it's an answer engine, not a search engine, where you can find the answer. So if I say how many households in California have 4 to 7 people, it tells me 3.5 million. If I ask for, do we have a SWOT analysis for Chrysler, it brings up a SWOT analysis for Chrysler. If I click on the link, it takes me back to the 200-page PDF it came from, or the 100-slide PowerPoint it came from, or the system eMarketer where it originated. But the bottom line is I can find answers quickly. And then again, you have an issue. You got 12 hours to resolve it. You can spend 12 hours just trying to find the data to support it, or you can spend 12 minutes finding the data, and you can spend 12 hours thinking and turning that data into the concept that you want to bring forward. And this is for everybody. and organizationally. I mean, we sign up, 5,000 marketers in a brand to use the kind of the tool sets.
I would totally agree with this, Dan.
Paradigm.
Immediately to my left, I think that, Dan, your comment at the beginning that 95% of the people in the room should not be using AI or thinking about AI, I think that kind of goes to the problem I was hitting on, which is, people should not be thinking, is this AI and should I use it, and check a box and say, yes, look, we're a great agency, we're employing the latest and greatest technology. I think what Dan was saying here is like, well, first of all, we all used AI this morning, right? We don't think about it. We used our voice to query our mobile phones and ask questions. And if you just sort of think about it, nobody cares that that's AI. It helped me to get here or do whatever it was we were trying to do and accomplish. And so I would think about how to leverage technology so that people are doing what people should be doing, and technology that you can leverage that's the bulldozer, the machine that can plow through tasks at a level that people can't. You should be thinking about it that way. Has anybody, we're all storytellers in here, you're marketers, so has anybody read The Purple Cow or Made to Stick? Seth Godin, it's a great book. Made to Stick is a great book. It's all about storytelling. And if you look at, videos of Steve Jobs, who's probably the heavyweight champion of storytelling from 1980, he's talking about, he uses phrases like the computer is the bicycle for the mind, and it's this whole story about research where they're trying to measure sort of the efficiency of movement between humans and animals from point A to point B. Humans were horrible at it. Once humans got on a bike, they were first at efficiency from point A to point B. So he talks about the computers are sort of the bicycle for the mind, which is this great tool that helps bring out the best in who we are. And so I think that, as you think about telling great stories for your clients, which by the way is what your job is, Dan, what you were talking about was very tactical. It's a very small percentage of the marketing ecosystem, this idea of attribution and campaigns and measurement. It's a little bit towards the middle to the end of that funnel, but it starts with really thinking about how to tell great stories. And I think there are phenomenal tools in the market that will leverage AI and some of the data that's out there for you to be able to tell better stories for your customers. That's the way I think about it.
No, please.
So there's a difference between thinking about your business and thinking about Google, this wonderful company. So the secret of Google is they've taken the entire internet, put that entire internet on 1 trillion bits of memory. You cannot do that. You cannot take the internet and put the internet in memory. It took them exactly 20 years to do, and they've done a really good job at that. The problem with artificial intelligence is you get this outcome, and you have no idea if it's right. You have no transparency over what is right. It is a complete black box to you. So the question is should you be relying on something with no clear attribution on whether or not it's working or not working? You can trust Google in terms of doing it because they've put the entire internet in memory, and they validated that over 20 years, and they've done it really, really well. So the question is, what do you do tomorrow, and what do you do in 5 years? Tomorrow, you should be focused on very, very basic things. Is your message working, or is it not working? I do a bunch of subset of campaigns. Are those campaigns actually having transparent effects on brand and transparent effects on conversion? Yes or no? Yes or no? Prediction and attribution. That is the only thing that you should be working on tomorrow based on what I've observed in your businesses. 3, 4, 5 years down the line, you can build a roadmap to do this, to understand how you embed these different tools within your business process. But most of you people, from what I understand, are still living the hell of PowerPoint. You're still living in the hell of PowerPoint. How many people have looked at PowerPoint in the last week? Okay. Stop. Stop. So the question is get the hell out of that trap. And to do so, you want to start with very, very, very basic things. Don't recreate Google. However, in 5 years, build a roadmap for how you can do that consistently over time. Use your minds for thinking about creative. Because you guys are fairly good at this already, but build a plan for how you can use those machines to complement what you understand, but they'll build that into your roadmap, not what you do tomorrow. Because what you have to do tomorrow is get out of the situation that you're in with very basic prediction and very basic attribution and some of the underlying technology to help you accomplish those things, and build a roadmap over 3 years to help you embed these more complicated machine learning understanding your businesses.
So we've talked about campaigns and storytelling, but we haven't talked a lot about personalization and actually getting those campaigns and stories in front of the people that you want to see them. So Lauren, Google has clearly been at the forefront of this for a long, long time. Can you talk about how AI plays into all that and what marketers need to be thinking about from your perspective?
Mm-hmm. So yes, we've been doing this for maybe not 20 years from an advertising perspective, but for an advertising perspective, we've been doing it for a good many years. We build AI and ML into a lot of the targeting capabilities and the optimization capabilities we have from a media placement standpoint, making it easier for marketers once they know who they're going after to get their message in front of the right person at the right time. So for example, lookalike targeting, what we call similar audiences, we take a whole bunch of our data, the data of our users who they've graciously entrusted us with, as well as the first party data from the advertisers or the marketers trying to reach these people. And we inject that data into machine learning that helps us find people just like the people we're trying to target, or actually the people we're going to target, depending on the model. So, and then there's the creative optimization piece of it. We've heard a lot about creative optimization already today. The ability to, based on real-time performance, how much did a person view a video ad online? Did they click on the video ad after watching it? All of those different things play into whether or not that version of the ad is better than the next version of the ad, and whether we serve that the next time a similar user watches the video like that. So all of this is based on volume and machine learning, which is, we built the model to learn from itself. So as we inject new data, it gets smarter and smarter and smarter about which creative to serve, what the performance of that creative is going to be, and is it served to the right person at the right time of day. All of that stuff kind of works together and hopefully gets better with time. I've observed personally it getting better, over the course of a campaign. The more data you put in, the more you get out of it. And I just look forward to the future and things that the capabilities we'll have in 6 months from now versus 12 months from now versus 5 years from now.
Yeah. So time for questions. And the first one is, so keep that mic up near your face.
Here it is.
The first one's for you.
Is it too close? Far away?
Can you share with us some examples when AI is useful? To your earlier point, maybe something that would help illustrate the difference between useful versus creepy?
Yeah. So I can use a personal example. I drive to work. Right, I work in the West Loop. I live in a western suburb. It doesn't make sense for me to take the train all the way into the city every day just to take the L back out to the West Loop. So I have allowed Google to use, and this works for Waze, it works for Apple, to use my location in my Google Maps application. And by providing them with my location as well as a host of other users who have entrusted Google with that location information, it can detect traffic patterns and find me a quicker way home. I can save 5 to 10 minutes every day based on this model that shows me how to get home, which is a great amount of, I would love to spend 10 more minutes with my children. To me, that's useful, right? And if it were to ever become unuseful, I could disallow the location capability data point on my phone. I think an example of when it crosses over into creepy is if you were to search for something, say a medication on Google, and an ad were to pop up, hey Lauren, we see that you've looked for this medication for wart removal. Why don't you try our website, right? So it's that individual, that way too personal application of my data and my search history or my personal interests that I think crosses the line.
But this seems like where it gets tricky, because isn't that a very personal line? So to everybody, I would think younger folks probably have a higher tolerance for that type of targeted marketing than, maybe some of people older than me, for instance, who aren't used to that. But then just generally, it's subjective. What makes you uncomfortable? Does anybody else have a thought on that?
I mean, I would agree that the example I was thinking about you hit on while you were talking in terms of the creepy side, and I think that kind of comes back to marketing. It's this idea that you can leverage all this data out there. There's lots of ways to follow people around the web without people really know they're being followed, because you have cookies enabled on your browser, and it's very hard to buy anything on Amazon or anywhere if you don't have cookies enabled. The experience is terrible. It also means that you can use all of this information, including what you've searched on, to then start to inform your ads. And I think that's kind of what we were talking about earlier in terms of really kind of the right message, right time. And so if someone is searching on something that's very personal to them that they wouldn't want the world to know about, to start to follow them around with ads on every website they go to that keeps popping up, I think is going to be a turnoff. And so I think it's more a strategy around how you employ some of the technology to embrace the audience you're trying to get in front of.
And so really quickly, this goes back to my original point around transparency. We always tell people what we're looking at. Like we will tell people if we're following their searches. We will tell people if we're looking at their location. And if they ever have a creepy experience, they have full right to opt out of that particular service, right? So it is up to I think it's really about being transparent about what data you're collecting, how you're using it to make their lives better, and then giving them the ability to opt out and making all of that easy. You shouldn't have to go search for that. It should be at the forefront, like myaccount.google.com. You can go see everything that we're looking at, and you can opt out of anything you don't want to be
I would
contributing.
encourage everybody to do that. It's actually pretty scary when you go look at that. I would challenge that, as Google and Facebook has a platform, have to offer that, but I don't think it's easy. Maybe Google makes it easier than others, but I'm sure that a large percentage of the internet population has no clue how to find that. I don't know how to make that better, but that's just a reality.
I think you'll see it get better with the GDPR stuff that you were referencing. I think that the EU has done a lot of trailblazing in catching up every company to what Google's doing as far as like a privacy standard. And so I just got my LinkedIn notification yesterday about how they've updated their privacy policy. So I think that you'll see the rest of the world, get up to standard and make it easier for you to see what people or what other companies are looking at as far as your personal data and be able to opt in or out in a way that makes it useful for you.
So here's an interesting question. So these folks are all PR practitioners, and there's a question about the media. So their marketing often has to run through a third party over which they can exert no control. So how do they apply this attribution and prediction technology in that setting?
I have an odd answer, which is, first of all, we know you can't control it. It's part of the process. But if you know who you're talking to, and specifically in the media or whether this is other messaging in other places, you can actually use AI to help determine the words you should use and if they will resonate with those individuals. And if you think about the types of personas or the types of people you're looking for, the type of people that are in the media in different spaces, we can today, if you had 6 personas that defined your different media types and people you want to communicate with, instead of a one broadcast to all of them, if you could send 6 different messages to the various types of people and let AI help you rewrite your words to resonate better with them, then you're more likely to have success.
From what I have seen, nobody has developed a good system whatsoever to help understand attribution within the PR context. Nobody. What I hear here is good prediction. What creative do I think is going to work? You guys write stories, you write a creative brief, you think about what segments are going to be more or less responsive to that. You can kind of test in a simulation through an experience who you think is going to be responsive, but it's very difficult. In fact, nobody has figured this problem out whatsoever, which is I run a test, I predict who's going to have it, I run a subsegment based on my creative brief, I launch that in a market, and what I see what is effective and what is ineffective, right? And that's very difficult because you're running a lot of multi-campaign, multi-channel services that go into platforms that you don't have retrieval of the data on the outside. So what is one simple way that you probably can do this? So isolate your testing. That's the only thing that I've seen work. Run a single campaign with a single piece, and then you run a kind of very basic pre-post analysis to see whether or not you improved a brand outcome or whether or not you improved a conversion outcome. It's a very single thing, and at least you can control for whether or not you ran a campaign. Didn't run a campaign, so you can do that very basic A/B, or you can try, so you can do that pre-post test, or you can try running an experiment with different channels and then attribute that to the fact that you ran the experiment or didn't run the experiment. However, in the traditional context that you're in, which is writing a story, then a creative brief, and then running it through lots of channels, nobody has figured out how to distinguish which of those campaigns are more or less effective and through which channels they were more or less effective. The only method that I know how to do this is to run a very simple controlled experiment where you can understand whether or not the campaign was effective or ineffective post hoc, and maybe change whether or not the different channels are ineffective or effective post hoc. But that's going to require a lot of buy-in from your customers, because they're really not going to want to do it, because they're going to have to change how they do it. So in the case of your business, again, make the investment in prediction. The attribution exercise is so difficult. So if you really want to get people over the edge, you're going to have to run some of these very basic tests to see pre-post whether or not they're working, or channel to vary whether or not you place those investments, to seeing whether or not there's a brand outcome measured through a pre-post survey, or a conversion outcome measured in the improvement in first-party purchase through site traffic and that you get from that. That is the current best practice that we have in attribution right now. I would encourage you to build a roadmap to do it. That is the only best practice that is knowable, given that the volume, given that the information that you have through primary purchasing outlets is not available to you.
All right, we are out of time. Thank you all. It's been fascinating and enlightening. Thank you. Hopefully some of you guys will stick around. We'll all be available for questions about artificial intelligence the rest of the morning.